So today I have, people we've met before, and I have somebody new as well, Kim, and we'll go around the room and introducing everybody to Facebook and to everybody else. If you want to go, Kim, if you want to introduce yourself and what you do.
Hi, my name is Kim Kahn, and for the past 20 years, I devoted my practice to nursing home abuse and neglect claims. I go all over the state of Florida, and unfortunately, there are many elderly who are still being abused and neglected in nursing homes here.
Okay. And Liz?
My name is Liz Potts. I'm an attorney here in Tampa, and I do family law, probate, and immigration, but mostly family law, and that's what I'm here for this evening.
Okay, great. And Dianna?
Thank you, Attorney Reyes, for having me. For those that are watching on my page, I am joining a group of some stellar attorneys. I'm in phenomenal company. My name is Attorney Dianna Winter-Funde. I practice only immigration here in the Tampa Bay area and outside of Tampa Bay. But if you're watching from my page, you can ask questions of the attorneys, family law, as well as nursing home abuse, right? Any questions immigration law related, and then we also have Edward Reyes sitting to my right, who you can ask about personal injury.
Well, there you go. So I guess she introduced it for me. I appreciate that. Edward Reyes, and as you guys know, this is on my page, but when it's shared, it won't be on my page. We do personal injury, a lot of mobility accidents, car accidents, things of that nature. So anything related to personal injury, we can help. And if it's a nursing home thing, we have Kim here, because I don't do, but I will send it to Kim. So we're going to open up discussions. We're just going to go some Q&A. Because we had some little technical issues, I don't know if the comments come up or not. But you can always comment, and if we don't have the opportunity to answer right now, we'll drop in and we'll answer the questions as the questions come in. And we'll share this video on our Local Answers Now channel that has like a group page that people can type in Q&As as well. And we'll split this video up in smaller segments to be easily digestible later on. So we'll start off by our new guest, because we have the pleasure of the spotlight is on. We have the pleasure of having her here today. So tell us what issues do you deal with, and what's are common things that come up in your business, questions, things of that nature.
Unfortunately, I deal with a lot of people that are neglected, and some of the signs and symptoms are bed sores.
Okay.
You also get a lot of people who have falls and broken bones, urinary tract infections. But there's also a lot of things that happen that people don't realize may actually be neglect. I have a lot of families that need answers, and they'll tell me, hey, mom or dad went downhill really fast. And generally that is not something that's expected, even with an elderly person who may have dementia, or you don't really see someone just going downhill that fast.
Okay.
Maybe cancer, things like that, but just a general older person. And a lot of times we look at the records and we'll see that medications are not being provided like they're supposed to. Which unfortunately happens with diabetics or those that have high blood pressure. I've seen, again, urinary tract infections where antibiotics are not being given like they're supposed to. Or there's delays in getting the elderly person to the hospital, and by the time they get to the hospital, they're what's known as septic. They're the infection is so raging that they then go into multi-organ failure and pass away, unfortunately.
Now you mentioned something going down really fast, and when you say that, because there's such things as the hospice and things of that nature, and people when they go there, and this is a question that I've heard from other people, and that's why I asked. When it's hospice, people already assume or that they're going down really fast. Does that still apply in a hospice setting, or you mean just in general, like when you?
Well, in general, sometimes hospice is brought in for end of life, but it's not when you die; it's how you die.
Okay.
And even if you're in a nursing home and you're under hospice care, doesn't necessarily mean you should develop bed sores.
Okay.
Sometimes you do because you are end of life and the skin is an organ and it's usually the first thing to go. But for example, pain management. I had a case with a woman who was passing away. She was in the dying process, and her pain level was off the chart, and she wasn't being given the proper pain medication. That's a dignity issue, and again, that goes to how one passes away, not the reason why. And it's very hard for families. I know as someone, I got involved in this work many years ago. My mother, when she was alive, was diagnosed with a brain tumor, and my first experience was going into a rehab facility, because let's be clear, a rehab facility is really a nursing home.
Gotcha.
And up in Philadelphia, and it was a pretty upsetting, scary situation. And that's how I honestly got into this work 20 years ago. And 5 years ago, before she passed, I had to make that tough decision of having to put her, even temporarily, into a rehab facility after her last brain surgery. It's not a very easy thing to do. Your brain's swirling. Nobody wants to put their family member into a nursing home, because one always thinks
like
they're
an
never
ALF.
getting out.
When you say like nursing home, like also like ALF and things of that nature?
An assisted living facility is different.
Okay.
People usually go from I'm at home, and then, I want mom or dad to have an extra eye, and they may go into what's called independent living.
Sure.
But it's a place where there's people are kind of supervising and watching, but they have their own apartment.
I gotcha.
Then the next step is, mom needs to be supervised and getting some medications, things like that. That's what an assisted living facility does. It's kind of the next step, from independent and then assisted living facility. For example, you have a lot of dementia residents who can get up and walk and are perfectly fine, but they, are wandering.
Okay,
So, there's different facilities to go in. And then usually the rehab or nursing home long-term care is they need significant help in what's called their activities of daily living, walking, transferring from a bed to a chair, bathing, feeding themselves, things like that. They need more assistance than just being independent or being supervised by staff.
Okay. And if you had to think of just top, and we'll go back and forth to everybody, of course, top 2 or 3 questions that you get asked very specifically, like what would be those questions? Because if they're asking you those questions, that means other people are probably thinking of the questions out
Sure.
there.
Oh yeah, totally agree. Mom was in their 80s and she died. Do I have a case?
Okay.
I personally don't care how old your loved one was.
Okay.
That's why I have my own practice, is that I can handle different types of cases, and I don't care if your mom or dad was 80 or 90 or going on 100. If they're abused or neglected, they're abused or neglected. Doesn't matter their age, they should be treated with dignity and respect. Another big question I get is, if mom or dad dies, is there a case?
Okay.
Reason I get that question asked is, for example, medical malpractice. People get that confused with the nursing home. There's 2 different laws for medical malpractice and nursing home. Under medical malpractice, only a spouse or a child 25 years or under are beneficiaries on the wrongful death statute.
Okay.
So a lot of times, and that's very sad, I see a lot of people neglected and abused in a hospital setting, and yet there's no lawsuit because the children are well over 25 and there's no surviving spouse. But in a nursing home case, an adult child can recover for wrongful death damages, meaning their own pain and suffering for the loss of their parent. And that is a big question. In fact, I got that question today. Mom passed away. Is there a case? Yes, there's still a case to pursue.
Okay. Any other pressing questions that you get? It's like a third one, if you have to think of a third one.
Again, it is one of those that, there's a lot of things as far as what constitutes neglect or abuse, and I'm one of those, let me get the records and review it, because, again, there's a story there. And a lot of times families come to me and they're complaining about one thing, but really the real problem is something else that I've recognized in the records. So that's why I go back to mom or dad went downhill really fast. if there's something unusual, different.
Well, how would a family know? Like, I don't know, let's say, in Dianna, especially in the immigrant community, they're scared to talk about anything
Yes.
all the time, and Dianna will definitely talk more about that. But how would somebody know to consult an attorney to say, this is getting serious, or mom just getting sick?
Well,
Or
again,
dad, or
one,
whatever.
if you're going to the nursing home and you're seeing, mom or dad, with dry food, or
Okay.
there's dried urine on the bed, or the place is dirty and filthy, that is an example of the care's just not being given.
Okay,
If
gotcha.
you're in the nursing home, they're supposed to do rounds at a minimum of every 2 hours.
Okay.
And you're sitting there for 2 hours and you don't see a CNA coming in and out of mom's room. You ring a call bell light and an aide doesn't come in and check on you 5, 10, 15 minutes. Those are signs of neglect, because if those things are happening while you're there,
Yeah, imagine
what's
you're not there. That
happening
makes sense.
when you're not there?
Okay.
And again, usually, unfortunately, it takes a hospitalization
Sure.
or that person suddenly passing away and somebody going, what the heck happened here?
Of course.
For the family to raise those questions. Because when you're going through it, you just want to make sure they're taken care of, that things are okay.
Okay, sorry, I thought we had an error. Okay.
That's okay.
Yeah. Sorry. Okay. And Liz, so tell me, and you've been on the show quite a few times, which is great. You've answered a lot of questions. But what are the most pressing issues that you find? And then we'll follow up with maybe the top 2 or 3 questions that you are asked the most.
The number one question is, how much is it gonna cost?
Yeah, that's true. All right, good point.
And that's really hard to say, because every case is different. Even though there may be generalities, yeah, we're unhappy, we've got kids, we own a house, we're in debt, blah blah blah. But every case is different, and so you have to take that into consideration. And so those are things. That's one of the big ones, and to try to allay people's fears that we're not going to fleece them or something. That's also sometimes difficult, but it's like it took them years to get to this point.
Sure.
So
What do you say on that same subject? What do you say to the point, it's not my fault, he cheated, why do I need to pay? And I say he, because that just sounds
Right.
stereotypical.
well, that's always the way it is.
Oh.
Women, we never cheat.
Yeah,
What are you
yeah.
talking about?
So why do I need to pay my attorney if it's his fault?
We ask in our petition for attorney's fees, but I always tell my client that that's not a guarantee. It's up to the court's discretion. And even if you prevail, if you went to trial, because if you all end up in mediation, that might be a deal breaker.
Sure.
It just depends. You may want to throw it out. It really just depends. And you also have to look at, well, in temporary fees, you have to see if there's a need and an ability to pay.
Okay.
Whereas if it's in a final decision by the court, it's kind of scary, because it doesn't matter whether the person that's going to get slammed can afford it or not.
Yeah,
The court's gonna like throw it at you and say, this is what you owe.
that's an issue on my side too.
But one of the things that you have to understand is, the attorney is doing all of this work, and we are not a bank. And so we have bills to pay and everything else, and you need to be responsible about paying. If the court orders that the other spouse has to pay, you'll be reimbursed.
Sure.
And that's how that works. So it's like it all took a whole lot to get to where we are. So,
That makes sense.
be responsible, and that's what I usually tell my clients.
Okay. Any other, beside the cost, because cost is clearly important, but anything else that you would say that are like the biggest thing? And I know we've answered this in the past about, does timesharing equal child support? That's an issue.
A lot of people, I want 50-50 time sharing, and they think that if you have 50-50 time sharing, that there's no child support. What people don't understand is that the 50-50 helps possibly defray some of those child support costs, because a lot of times one of the spouses does make more than the other. And so once you get to 73 nights, we don't talk days, these are overnights.
Okay.
But once you get to 73 overnights a year, we start seeing a slight change and a discount in your child support payments. Not a whole lot, $3 or $4 here in the beginning, but when you get to the 50-50, that could really mean a whole lot.
So that's the magic number, 73. Never
73 overnights.
Overnights. Okay.
Yes.
It's a very odd distinction, but that's just how
Go
it is.
figure.
Okay. Any other thing that you get asked quite a bit that you think that people may want to know?
We're in the midst of summer, and I'm coming up on a lot of people who want to go traveling.
Oh,
And
good point. Yeah.
one of the things I'm
travel
having
too.
an issue with, I'm having an issue with one of my clients.
Yeah.
She is perfectly okay with her soon-to-be ex giving permission to allow the children to go out of the country. And I don't feel that it should be, if somebody is willing to take the children on a trip, especially out of the country, that they should, that's like too much control to me. And so I'm trying to explain to her that I can understand giving ample time, like say 45 days prior to, and the itinerary, making sure that the passports are in order, to file the itinerary with the Department of State with their SAFE program, and things of that nature, to show that they're not like a flight risk, because that I'm hearing too is like, well, they're U.S. citizens, they are, where are they going?
Sure.
They have a home, they have stable employment. Why are they going to run away from that?
Sure.
So trying to explain that allowing the other person to take the children, or to allow you to take the children, is something that should be not a privilege, but that should be a right for you to be able to do with your children, as long as there are safety precautions in order. But I don't feel that somebody should have that control. What happens if they don't like where they're going, or they're jealous because they
That's a
can't take them?
problem.
It's like,
Yeah.
no, you can't go, and you don't. And then you
Yeah.
spend money, because we have to go to court to go, and it's not an
Yeah,
emergency, and I don't even think it's expedited. So that's an issue.
Yes, an emergency, to your point, an emergency to somebody, it's not an emergency to the courts.
No.
Like, everybody has an emergency all the time.
Well,
Doesn't mean it's an emergency to the courts.
there are specific standards for emergencies, and pretty much unless the child is being abducted or harmed in some way, it's probably not an emergency.
Okay, good information. Dianna? Now, Dianna, she's been one of our favorites here on the show.
I'm a regular,
Yeah.
the go-to in case
The go-to.
nobody shows up. I'll be here.
Yeah, we always enjoy your company. Dianna, we just spoke about some very interesting issues, and maybe we'll talk about it here in travel and cruises. And Dianna her business on fire right now because of our not going in the whole political route at all. But I'm saying her business on fire
Let's
because
talk politics.
because
I mean, why not?
because
Yeah,
our
booming
current,
business
Yes.
right now.
because our current environment.
Right.
And so please tell us kind of the common issues that you find.
So we're in a reactionary immigration phase, meaning our laws haven't changed that much. If you look at the Immigration and Nationality Act, it is not as if an administration came in overnight and changed the laws. That is not what's happening. What has been happening is we're in the enforcement phase. Now, every during any administration, there's either a lull in immigration, meaning it's low priority, it's not on the agenda, there's not a lot of bills or actions or policy memorandums going through. But I think in this last administration, we've seen a very active administration, as most recently as last week.
Sure.
And I say my practice is reactionary for many reasons, because people watch the news and they wake up realizing I am undocumented.
Yeah.
what do I need to do? Or I have a green card, meaning I have the right to live, work, and stay in the United States. But, years ago, that little felony possession of a controlled substance in 2009, which was not a big deal, you probably have done some time on it, now is being enforced because you have violated the terms of your green card. So that is what I mean when I say we're in this reactionary phase of immigration. So all that needs to happen is for my clients to go to bed at night, wake up in the morning, watch the news for them to call me.
Sure.
Most recently, we saw where now you have to display your social media handles.
Wow.
And I found that funny.
That sounds.
But I'm like, look, you've learned this in grade school 101. If you don't want it out there, don't put it out there. However, that's going to backfire because in the case of, for example, if we're married, why is it on our social media handle that I'm single? Right? So you don't get that right anymore to be so independent or be so private in your public life. Right? So that's where we're seeing a lot of changes.
And what if on the social media thing, and I want to go back to the enforcement in a minute, but what happens if they mark their page as private? Because people, they on my side, personally, they're like, oh yeah, it's private. I'm like, we still find out.
It's not that private, okay? It is not that private. Years gone by, an immigration officer would show up knocking at your door to see if you live here, who do you live with, can I see the bedroom with the toothbrush in the bathroom, 2 toothbrushes. Now, we've helped them. We've created an environment where we've helped our investigators, where all they need to do is look at your Facebook page to see that you're with Johnny, even though your immigration application says you're married to Tony.
Gotcha.
So that is where some of that comes in, where you no longer have that privacy.
Okay.
And you have to display those handles. It is not as if you can say, well, let me just delete everything and pretend like I've never been on social media. You have to display that on your visa applications.
So if you delete stuff, could they ask you to go back and, because, there's a way to archive?
I always say it's never that easy to delete your footprint from the media. So I can go into my Facebook page now and I can delete a couple pictures. You don't know when and if an immigration officer have looked at those pages. It doesn't happen right when you're coming in for the interview. I mean, they can be investigating your case for the last year and a half. It is not uncommon now for ICE to show up at your place of employment.
Wow.
Why? Because on your Facebook page, it says, I work at so-and-so. So to some extent, we have been helping the service enforce the actions against us. And I say us because I'm an immigrant. FYI, I'm now a citizen, but I still say us because I belong to the population. So that is the irony.
Who was that? It's Alexa. Alexa's writing you out the ice.
Naturalized, I'm a citizen.
Now, you say the word enforcement, and clearly you know what enforcement means. But for everybody else out there, what does actual enforcement mean to you? Like, what is it? That means that they get shipped back to their country? Do they get to Chrome? And then I say Chrome because we just talked about that, and I just found out what that was. Not me personally.
Yeah.
But what is all this mean?
So enforcement means that, so for every non-citizen, there are rules that we have to live by. Non-citizen, I'm lumping my lawful permanent residents and I'm lumping my undocumented. We no longer say illegal immigrants. It is now undocumented. There are rules that you have to live by. If you're a lawful permanent resident and you've broken any one of those rules, whether it is staying outside of the country for more than a year, whether it is failing to change your address with the service United, yes, most people don't know that that's a crime. Within 10 days, even if you're a lawful permanent resident, within 10 days of moving, you need to change your address.
And we do that with which form?
The AR-11 officer, and it can be done online, but you have to change your, and I'll tell you where this little nugget will come back to haunt you. And you cannot commit any crimes that violates the Immigration and Nationality Act. And the big crimes that jump out, counsel, correct me if I'm wrong, your burglaries, your rapes,
Yeah.
your kidnappings, your robbery,
Trafficking.
your controlled
Oh, yeah,
substances,
yeah, yeah.
you bringing that minor across the border, that's called human trafficking, even if that child is yours. So once you commit,
I didn't know that part.
any of those
Yeah,
crimes,
kidnapping.
then
Yeah.
yes, that is you can't
own
do
kid-
that.
you can't bring your own-
No,
wow,
not
look at that.
illegally. It's human
Not even-
trafficking. Yes. So once you
Wow.
commit any of those crimes, then of course the service can begin enforcement actions against you. It doesn't mean ICE is going to come knock on your door, put you in handcuffs, and take you away. You do have some due process, and I use the term due process loosely because you're not a citizen, so you don't get to go to court and say, "Where's my attorney? I'm going to remain silent," or you're going to say, "Your Honor, it wasn't me. Prove it was me," or I can't even challenge that car stop that landed you in trouble. So all those constitutional protections do not exist. And I always tell my clients, it was you. It was you. It was you who was in the car.
Yeah,
so I
exactly.
can't say it wasn't you.
Yeah.
So that's what I mean about enforcement action. Certainly there is some process. You have the right to attorney paid for out of your own pocket. You get to mount some defenses that are in the Immigration and Nationality Act. Of course, I can make some constitutional arguments. But for the most part, our relief, whatever defenses we have, are embedded in the Immigration and Nationality Act. And as immigration attorneys, we spend our entire career trying to retrofit. I think it's like maybe 8 or 10 defenses when you think about it. So we're constantly trying to push somebody, making it fit into one of those defenses.
And we talked about an issue. What happens if you came when you were 2 years old?
Mm-hmm.
Your parents brought you in. You grew up. You went to high school. You went to college. You lived this whole life, and then all of a sudden, you got yourself in trouble in high school. You served your time. You got out, and then you went on a cruise, and then they didn't let you back on the ship, or let you back on the ship. So talk to us about that process, because to me, if you came when you were 2 years old or 3 years old, you didn't have the rights, or you couldn't make yourself a citizen at that age or whatever. So what happens in those scenarios? Because I'm sure it affects quite a few people out there.
It does.
I mean, not exactly that fact pattern.
It
but
does, and I like to call these
Yeah.
babies. I call them my American babies because they have forgotten what it's like to be an immigrant. Most immigrants, myself, I came here as an adult. So at the back of my mind, driving, going into a store, I'm an immigrant.
Sure.
So the hypothetical you use when somebody comes here when they're 2 years old, they've forgotten what it's like. They don't know what country they're from.
No.
But as a non-citizen, whenever you leave the country and you're coming back, you are knocking on the doors of America and you're asking to be admitted. So it doesn't matter if you've had your green card for 40 years or 30 years or 20 years. So that crime that went under the radar under our former administration, where you're considered low priority, we're not enforcing. First of all, if we started enforcement, we don't have enough ICE officers to enforce all of these low-level, one-time offenders.
Sure.
What we're seeing now is that these people are taking cruises. They're going home to vacation in Guatemala. They're going to
Not thinking of
London.
anything.
No,
even
absolutely
thinking
not.
about it,
They're
yeah.
an American. That's all they've known.
Yeah.
They've paid taxes. They've attended school. Some have renewed their green card for the past 2-3 decades because a green card lasts 10 years.
Sure.
And they are asking to be admitted. Once you come back in, you're fingerprinted. And what pops up? All that criminal activity.
Wow.
And the officer has a couple choices upon re-entry. They can either admit you back into the country, or they can parole you into the country from which you thought you belonged.
Wow.
Or place you in deferred action, meaning there's something here, they're not sure what it is. And what they do, which is really slick, they send you to go get your criminal records. Go get it and come back and see us. At which point you can be detained. Because it all depends what's in that record. You can be detained and you can be placed into removal proceedings, which that's a topic for a whole other day, but we can talk about that. But you can be placed in removal proceedings. For most people, it's an absolute nightmare. One day their life is normal. The next day they're sitting either in a detention center in Broward or Chrome. There's no detention center here in the Tampa Bay area. So they're somewhere outside of Miami waiting to have their case heard.
Wow. That's
And that's
crazy.
if they're nice and they don't do any like diesel therapy, because
Mhm.
I've had clients who've been trucked around to Texas
Yes.
and everywhere else.
Yes, because what the service says, and I'm not getting political, is they'll put you in a bed where they have space. So they may have a bed. They may very well have a bed in Pinellas. They've bought private beds, so they may buy a bed from Pinellas County.
see.
But I think they do it to some extent to almost get you to say, "Send me home.
But
Sure.
if you don't
Send me
have,
home."
the other thing is that I had found with some of my clients is that if you don't have a valid passport,
Mhm.
your home country
That
may
won't
not,
accept you.
they may not accept
So
you.
what are you, like in a purgatory state?
Yes.
Yes,
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 you'll
you
sit in
are.
detention forever while they contact your consulate.
Wow.
Some people
Wow.
use that as a way to kind of sit tight,
Mm.
meaning where are you going to send me? But they'll just have you sitting there if you do not have the proper travel documents.
It sounds it sounds very un-American.
It's
You know?
very un-American.
It sounds
It's-
really bad, but I guess we have our ways of doing things, and
And I'll
that
add this
sounds
and then
really
I'll
bad.
shut up. And what the most un-American part of it for me is going to like an ICE check-in. That is
Oh.
where, as a client, your clients, they're undocumented, and they've been undocumented maybe 10, 15 years. These ICE check-ins, the room is not even this big. The chairs you don't want to sit. You put your paperwork under a window. So very demeaning. The
Whoa.
most un-American part of that is to see their children, American citizens, walking in with mom and dad.
It's heartbreaking.
And that's the life they know. So that is the most un-American part of it, I think.
Wow, that's crazy.
I've got a question.
Mhm.
Have you heard the case about I think it was the two gentlemen that
The twin babies?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. What do you think of that?
That is, first of all, it makes for good, to give you the facts. So correct me if I get it wrong. It's a same-sex couple.
Right.
And they did in vitro fertilization,
Correct, yeah.
and twins were born.
Okay.
One of the couple, one partner is Indian, dark complexion.
Yes.
So clearly you can see the difference. The other
Yeah.
partner
Sure.
looks Caucasian.
Yeah, I was gonna say American.
Sure enough,
whatever
these
you call
twins
it.
are born. One looks like dad, and the other looks a little bit more like dad. They've given birthright citizenship to the child, who is the American, whose father is
Father's
American.
American, right.
Because over here, this gentleman who's really dark complexioned is, I believe, Canadian or some other country.
Yeah, some
not
other country. I don't know why I was
American.
thinking the
Not
UK,
American.
but not American. Yeah.
It's making its way through the courts because they're saying this child is not the child of a U.S. citizen, even though both
Right.
were in the same
Wow.
womb.
How
Right.
weird.
It makes for great facts.
That sounds like Supreme Court. That sounds
It
like
sounds
that sounds
like
like
they
law school
may-
It
stuff.
sounds like a law school exam.
Law school
It sounds like a
Yeah.
law school
It
exam.
does. It
It sounds
does.
like a law school exam.
But
That
yeah,
blue book
it's just crazy how extreme we've gotten. I mean, how do you?
How picky you mean?
Yeah. Well, and it's just
Mm,
it's a child.
yeah,
It's a child.
Well, that's
it's
crazy.
not my child. That's
Well,
It's a child. Yeah.
as far as my, like my stuff on the personal injury, I mean, some of the things I get is about property damage, issues of liability. So a lot of people, there's property damage is separate than personal injury, and many people don't get that. And a lot of attorneys, if there's no personal injury, they drop the property damage, but they're two separate things. So a lot of people they go out to an attorney and they're like, oh, I just want to get my car fixed. And then a lot of attorneys don't take that case if there's no pain and suffering. And as an attorney, and I think clients sometimes want you to tell them something, and you're like, I'm not telling you you need to tell me if you have, like, kind of
Yeah.
give me your if you have pain or not. But this comes up quite a bit with the property damage, and it's they're two separate claims, two separate issues, two separate adjusters many times.
Yeah.
And so whenever we got to handle them completely separate. A lot of times what happens that it's separate but it's together, because a lot of times, even though you're talking to the opposing side, the at-fault party, the person that crashed into you, if we're talking about a car accident, the property damage, even though they're different adjusters, they sometimes try to ask you information to incriminate you on the liability side. So one of the things that I tell my clients is, and we help a lot of our clients with the property damage side as well, is how do you get your car fixed? That's one of the biggest questions. Is we can talk to them as far as coordinating just when the adjuster's going to look at the car, but that's it. Because, and don't be be careful because adjusters are slick, you know, and they'll try to sneak in questions. So tell me, how do you feel, this and that. And even though they're separate claims, they're actually together when it comes to their insured, the insurance company. So that's a kind of nuance that a lot of people don't get.
So never, ever, 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 ever talk to an insurance agent unless you're
They're sneaky
your
though.
lawyer.
They're kind of sneaky, you know.
Yeah.
And a lot of times people, they think they have full coverage, and full coverage is never, there's no such thing as actual full coverage, honestly, because they sell so many items, you know, they sell disability, they sell this. So a lot of people, they think full coverage, and normally all they have is basic PIP, personal injury protection, and basic property damage. In fact, sometimes they don't even have bodily injury. So some people, they see, oh, they had a 2018 car, it should be new, so it should have great insurance. Come to find out, it has a $10,000 bodily injury policy, which means if your injuries outweigh the $10,000, we run into a problem of seeking reimbursement for your pain and suffering. Going to the point that you said about the collectible, it's the same thing. Like, if somebody crashes into you, and I'm using a car because it applies to the majority amount of people, and this could be with, you know, mopeds, it could be with scooters, but I'm using car collisions, not slip and falls, because that changes depending on the case. It's a collectible thing. It's a big thing. A lot of people, they feel like they're wronged, and they are truly wrong. They are,
Right.
you know, this person changed this person's life because this person was negligent. Completely wrong. However, they only may have a small policy, or they may not have any policy for that matter. And then the client's like, well, it's not right, I want to sue them. Okay, great. For what? What are we suing them for? We run an asset check, we find out there's no assets.
Right.
If they have a primary residence, it's homesteaded, which means we can't take it out because it's homesteaded anyways. You can't take all their cars. You know, you can. There's certain things that are covered under the protection, so these people are not collectible. And then what happens is that it costs quite a bit of money to file suit to get a judgment, which in turn somebody can file bankruptcy against to get rid of the judgment. And we can maybe cancel that person's driver's license, but it still doesn't bring money it doesn't bring recovery for our clients. So I mean, it's kind of an issue that I deal with quite a bit on our side, and there's other things that we can do to try to work it out and help our clients. But that's a big issue. Is I have this much pain and this much recovery, but I'm wrong, and I have a case now that we're working on at the moment. A teenage boy, or almost teenage boy, crashed into this client, completely changed their life. Internal bleeding.
Oh, wow.
She multiple broken bones, ICU for a week, critical care. She owns a business, and the business is about to go defunct if she doesn't do something. She can't work. The person has a $10,000 policy. That's a problem.
That gets you nowhere.
Yeah, well, we're working on a lot of things, but that's a big roadblock, and this happens more than you know. There's more uninsured drivers out there, uninsured or underinsured. Yeah, that's the correct thing. There's more underinsured drivers out there than there is insured drivers with good policies, and it happens a lot in the low socioeconomic, the lower socioeconomic climate because of the fact that they can't afford insurance for one, and or if they have insurance, it's really bad insurance. But when people are injured, they're still causing the injuries. There's still significant injuries, and there's no coverage, and that's a problem.
Well, let's also be clear that insurance companies don't want people to get to get uninsured or underinsured coverage. It doesn't benefit them.
Right.
So they want consumers to try and skip over that part.
They do.
But it's probably the most important piece of car insurance you can have. But you have your PIP, you have your property damage, you have your bodily injury. But to me, and I realized that when I had done some car crash cases, I was like, oh my God, there are so many people out there who don't have enough coverage. What happens if I'm seriously injured? And the most important piece of insurance to protect yourself, to protect your family, is uninsured or underinsured motorists. It's a must, and people have got to think about. I understand with low income, you've got to figure out where to cut costs somewhere else, because God forbid you're ever in that crash, you need that insurance. Because not everybody gets hit by Oprah Winfrey.
No,
Right.
no,
Yeah.
and for everybody out there that doesn't know what that means, uninsured motorist means if somebody that crashes into you or hits you or whatever the case is, if they don't have bodily injury or they don't have enough bodily injury, your uninsured motorist will cover depending on what that amount is. So if you only have a $10,000 uninsured motorist policy, and there's only a $10,000 bodily injury policy, but your injuries are $100,000, well, the 10 will tender the bodily injury side, the at-fault party, and then the uninsured will only cover you up to the 10, whatever the bodily injury coverage is. So there's still, I mean, it depends on the injuries, and it also depends on the amount of bodily injury you have.
Right. Yeah.
Because they're not going to
you
give
only
you.
match it.
Yeah, you can only match it, or you can do stacked uninsured motorists, which is
Again, they don't tell
multiply.
people.
No, they don't.
Yeah, they don't tell people about
Yeah.
stacked. Always stack. If you have more than one car, always stack.
Yeah, and stacked means if you have 5 cars on your policy, it's whatever that uninsured policy is times 5. So that's good. And one of the things on uninsured motorists is the insurance company, they don't want to tell you. You're right. And I'm not going to call any name. So I'm not going to call nobody out like that. But so what they do is they send these electronic waivers. And they send these electronic waivers as you're signing up for the insurance. And it's just one of the quick questions, like a click, 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 click. And then you reject uninsured motorists. And that's a problem because most people
do it.
Most people have no idea they rejected it. And Geico's, sorry. Bleep, bleep, bleep. So
We're going to edit that out.
yeah, or not. So, but some insurance companies are very good about trying to have you sign this rejection, and you can't use. We can create the argument that you don't understand the language or the case is. I'm like, well, you live in the United States, you should have understood, or you should have bought a translator.
Yeah.
So that becomes a problem all the time. However, with that being said, if the insurance company cannot produce the signed waiver, now they have to afford you the coverage of what you had for bodily injury, as if you would have accepted it. Which that part is good. We've caught some people with that too. In fact, we got some people that were undocumented.
That was going to be my next question. Can they recover?
They can recover.
Yes.
Oh, wow.
So we had one quite some time ago, and it was not a very easy case because it was like New Year's Eve, like probably 1 a.m. Clearly, there's other influences and things that were happening. He was in a car accident, and he had really, really high hospital bills and a whole bunch of things that were going on. He had no insurance. He had suspended license. There's a whole bunch of stuff going on. Like it was like a cluster of issues.
Yeah.
But because he lived in a household with somebody that had insurance, we were able to qualify him, which was great. Because they couldn't show us, because it was one of these small like broker companies, they couldn't show us the rejection for uninsured motorists, nothing, and then they had to qualify for uninsured motorists, and we got a settlement from the at-fault party.
Oh wow.
So it's a settlement from that, and we got the PIP coverages, and we got the uninsured motorists. But it was a little bit of a digging.
Okay.
But so a lot of, and that comes up quite a bit because I'm riding around undocumented, no license, and I get into a car accident. What should I do? Because I do not want to stand here and wait for the police to come. It's a double-edged sword. Double-edged sword. So
Right?
You're
Yeah,
right.
well,
We might need a criminal defense attorney here
Yeah.
coming in on that one.
I don't want to
So
wait.
it depends. If your record is clean, like you said, like there's no issues or whatever the case is, you're probably fine.
Well, did you do an exchange of information?
Yeah, that would
You have
At
to.
least, okay,
You
at
have
minimum.
At a minimum, because if you leave a scene of an accident, it is
That's
a
something
crime.
else.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
And the degree of damages to the other person depends on what type of felony it is. So I never recommend leaving the scene, but if it's a minor crash, exchange of information.
Okay.
And I would recommend if you exchange information, if you have a cell phone, you take a picture that
Yeah,
you've
to prove
exchanged
that it happened.
the
Because if not, it
information.
changes.
Exactly. You
Videos,
always
everything
want
else.
proof that you
So
did
if
that.
you're listening and you're undocumented and you get into a car accident, don't leave the scene of the crash. Take a picture.
Lots of videos,
exchange
pictures.
information, lots of videos.
And any witnesses that we can gather
And
in case,
witnesses.
because later on the witnesses become important. Those witnesses are not in your car. So let me go back. Witnesses that are like literally witnesses that saw the accident, not people
Right.
that are hanging out with you. Oh, my friend was in the car. No, your friend doesn't make. Your friend was a party to whatever.
Right.
I get that a lot. Good Lord, yeah, but somebody.
Or maybe just have you on speed dial when
Yeah.
you're in the accident.
Yeah.
You go, I've had a bad, Eddie, I've had a bad day.
Yeah. And I get a lot of calls from the scene of the accident, and it's funny because they're like, I had one and it was the craziest thing. The guys are like in the ambulance, like yeah, they're taking me out in the ambulance. I'm like, do that first. I was like,
Yes.
I was like, you know what? I mean, great. I'll be there. And actually, wait, it was a pretty decent. It was crazy accident, but I mean,
Decent accident.
sorry.
I love that. No, I love it.
It was a very.
Things
I'm glad that there can be decent.
It was I guess a lot of moving parts, I guess I can say, but the guy called me and I will talk to them at the scene because you're right, a lot of people don't understand, and actually on the whole undocumented, a lot of them are Hispanic clients. They don't speak the language, and the problem with that is a lot of law enforcement don't speak the language, and the bigger problem is that they don't talk to the client and they only hear the other side.
Parties,
Right.
and it's a biased report.
Super biased. They normally give the client the non-AFR, the supposed non-AFR party the ticket, and they say, "Oh, it's your fault." Now we have a whole issue of liability that we have to deal with. We got to prove that this happened, and but it happens a lot, like a lot. So I tell the clients, listen, if there's no translator there, I would see if the law enforcement has somebody else that can call in to translate. Don't move the cars, take a lot of pictures, do the videos. Call us. I literally will talk to the law enforcement, and sometimes they don't want to talk because they're too cool. The law enforcement, whatever.
It's not a big deal. I'll take care of it.
Like, no, let's make sure that we get the right facts and make sure that our client is not number one on the police report, because if they're number one, that means that they think the law enforcement that are the clients at fault. But we deal with that issue a lot.
I can only imagine.
All our Hispanic, not all of them, but majority of our Hispanic clients, we have that problem. Automatically, they say liability is it's our client's problem. Like, well, hold on, you hit this person on a moped. I mean, seriously, like you crashed into this person. You know, like the facts are so the facts are so crazy that I'm like, it's so clear. But what happens that they don't talk to the client; they only talk to the other people, and then the other person tells them their side of the story. And then if it's a little bit questionable, they'll just say, "Oh, we'll just do this." Not all law enforcement does, but there are the few that are just trying to hurry up. And or if they don't write reports, sometimes that's another problem. And then we run into that problem because now we got to prove it, and they're only hearing the one side of the story, which it's a problem.
Do you get with a lot of accidents? There's so many people now that have like closed circuit TV or like videos and stuff. Are you able to get things like that from, say, store
CVS
or something like that, or is it worth it? Or
so we can send out preservation letters, and sometimes they'll give us the information. If not, we have to follow. We have to actually go to the court to get subpoenas. But if depending on how the accident went, the law enforcement officer may be able to get it too. So like if it's like a hit and run and things like that, so part of their investigation, they can get it much faster than I can get it. And we could we can send a letter, and hopefully they'll say, okay, fine, we'll give you a copy. But like bigger places like banks and stuff like that, they want everything to go through the courts.
Okay.
And that's kind of a problem because we don't even know if we want to take this case yet.
Right.
But then we have to go through the process of trying to subpoena records and things like that.
What kind of what recommendation of photographs at the scene do you make for your clients or potential clients?
I have them take pictures of, the first thing is of the person's tag in case they leave, because that happens, Take pictures of the people, take pictures of any visible injuries. Um, if our client's hurt, I don't want them going under the car taking pictures.
Right.
But maybe somebody else that may be there to see if there's any frame damage or anything like that. Take pictures of the whole scene, because a lot of times there's other contributing factors, and we need to see.
So yeah, for I guess accident construction or something to be able
Yeah,
to.
yeah, and also, what if it was a sign from the county, or what if it was whatever backwards? That happens too, right? The randomest things
Right.
come up, and take
Skid
video.
marks.
Exactly, that too.
Yeah.
You know, if it's daylight or not, who else was there? Other parties, you know, because that comes up. Like, oh, they only had one. They said they only had one person in the car. Like, well, there's 8 people in the car, or
Right.
whatever the case is, or they switched drivers. You know, because that happens whenever there's issues of drugs and DUI. They're like, oh, I wasn't driving.
Right.
They were driving. As many pictures as possible. Thank God for digital cameras. Pictures are cheap now. You just snap 100 pictures in a heartbeat, and video. You know, and I think that's good. And especially if the person's under the influence, and certain things we can't bring up, but it would help a lot, especially like in mediation and things like that. More data is better than less data when it comes to proving liability, and at least in my opinion.
Oh yeah, I agree.
You know, and damages too, and document your injuries. So if you have bruising, and every day as it darkens or whatever, document that stuff, and that we can best tell the story.
Yeah, I've learned the squeaky wheel gets the grease. Don't try and be the tough guy.
Right.
I mean,
No.
don't over exaggerate. Again, social media, things like that, because they're going to get it. So don't say you're in severe pain and then you're rock climbing the next day.
True. Or skydiving.
Or
like that.
skydiving.
Oh,
or,
yeah.
I've had rock climbing. Yeah, you've had skydiving.
That was different.
But definitely the squeaky wheel. Don't be the tough guy. You got to write down how you're feeling, how it's affecting your life, all of those things. Make sure I don't know if you've ever had these issues. People have to work and they miss doctor's appointments.
Yeah.
And that really hurts your case if you're missing doctor's appointments and physical therapy appointments. And again, I know it's hard because people have jobs, but you've got to make those appointments when you know you can make it. It's better to be 2 weeks without an appointment and you make that appointment than scheduling all these appointments and you've missed them. It doesn't look good.
Well, no, and it doesn't, because, like I tell everybody, the insurance company only knows you what's on paper. So if there's long track records of you not treating, they're going to say, clearly you can't be that hurt.
Right.
If they didn't treat, but what they may not realize, and we try to put in demand to help them realize, is that this affected you for the simple things like brushing your teeth, tying your shoes, the things that we take for granted because we do it every day. But what happens if you can't tie your shoes? That's a real problem. Like it's crazy, but a lot of people don't think about it because they only think of the big things. Oh yeah, I have a fractured, or I have a herniated disc, and okay, but how does that affect your actual life? So the disc is the nuclear issue, but how does it affect everything else? Can you not play with your kids anymore? Can you not? So all that stuff is what adds for the general damages to really sell the story, which is that person's story, to the adjuster that doesn't know you.
This wouldn't affect you, but washing your hair.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
That's a
No,
big one.
I-
Taking a
I-
bath.
Yeah.
Head hair.
Yeah.
I mean, I hate saying when you have
Sure.
to go to the bathroom.
Exactly.
These are things that if you're affected by, that they need to let you know.
Yeah, exactly. A lot of people don't think about those things, and in your business, that's really important because it affects and I'm sure that while the family's saying this person can't do this and they could, now you're like, well, what's going on with that? Like, why can't they? What's happening?
If they've gotten worse. So one good thing is nursing homes, they actually they have assessments. They're required by Medicare. So it tells you, what level of function they're at. And there are daily, if they're accurate, there are usually daily forms saying this is their level of functioning of this task this day.
My mother has long-term care insurance, and she's at an ALF at this point. And and I'm her agent, her DPOA, and so whenever they call, because they call
Mhm.
yearly to do those assessments, and then there's the Medicare assessment and all
Well,
those.
yeah, for an assisted living, they call it's an 1823 form. They have to do it
Yeah.
either yearly or every other year to make sure that they're meeting the criteria for an assisted living facility.
And then the insurance company
Learning so
goes and
much.
has their
Yeah.
own, and
Mhm.
but it's I'm there because she has dementia, and so it's like she's like way over there sometimes when
Right, right. As long as she can be in an assisted living
Yeah.
with memory care, that's
Mhm.
where you'd want her to be, as long as you can do it.
Mhm.
But that's a whole other topic, long-term care insurance.
yeah.
When my mom got sick of it, bought long-term care insurance.
wow.
Yeah.
I'm telling you what.
Well, what we'll do is we'll have our another one. We'll touch on
Yeah.
different subjects. Is there any closing remarks that anybody wants to make? Like any?
The only thing that I would add, and my office number is 813-413-2424. Again, Kim Khan. You don't have to call me even if you think you might have a case. If you have an issue of, I'm not sure where to place mom or dad, I've been given a list from the hospital of X, Y, and Z, call me. There are a number of resources out there that people don't realize, and I will walk you through the things that you can look at, on the internet. I'll give you my own advice after doing this 20 years and telling you companies to stay away from.
Nice.
Things like that.
That's
I
good
don't
resource.
charge for that. I just want families to be in the best, listen, they all have their issues, but to
Sure.
be in the best potential place that mom or dad can be in. So feel free to use me as a resource. I'm more than happy to do that.
Okay. Liz, anything?
My phone number is 813-988-9190, and if you have any questions about family law, or you're considering divorce or relocation or postnuptial issues, or I also do prenuptial agreements, give me a call.
Cool. Yeah.
Same here. 813-221-1366. 813-221-1366. And my advice would be, it is easier to take your immigration matter into your own hands than to be placed in removal and then you try to take your immigration matter into the government's hands. So if you're here undocumented, or if you've opened the mail and you've gotten a less than pleasant letter, give us a call and we'll try to figure it out with you.
Okay. And our phone number at the firm is 813-421-3411. It's 813-421-3411. And my tidbit of advice, or if there's any issue of life, even if you're not sure if it's your fault or not your fault, even if it is your fault, still give us a call, because we could even though we don't do defense work, we can still kind of walk you through the process for a few minutes. And sometimes, even when it is your fault, if the injuries are great enough, we can still help you with other things. So feel free to reach out. You can send me a Facebook message. You can call our firm. Very, very active on messaging back and forth throughout the day. It may not be right away, but I'll send you a message right back. Or if you call the firm, they'll pick up 24 hours, 7 days a week. All right. Well, we'll toast to the water this time. We'll toast to the water this time. There you go. It's
Thank you,
late.
everybody.
There you go.
Yes,
Boom.
thank you.
Cheers.